All right, so the day is over, but she's been speaking to some of the top leaders and continues to bring you analysis from Gallagher Estate. My colleague Iman Rapeti, over to you.
Good afternoon, Francis, and good afternoon as well to our viewers. If you're just joining us on Full View, we are live at the Gallagher Convention Centre here in Midrand for day one of the DA's Federal Congress. A lot has happened today. So for those of you who weren't able to view these developments minute by minute, fortunately, we've got you covered. We have with us in our discussion for this afternoon Zwandile Mbeje, who is our SABC political editor, and Dr. Ronesh Dhawraj, who's going to just share some research perspectives on what has been shared today. Good evening to the pair of you. I'm glad to see you looking still so fit, many hours after being in the seat. And maybe let's just start with our perceptions. First of all, a Congress that is run on time. Like a well-oiled machine.
Well,
unusual for you as well.
Yeah, so not used to this. It actually ended 3 hours before the scheduled time, so which was quite amazing from the point of view of what we're used to on conferences like this.
Yeah.
So indeed, but it has gone quite smoothly. So we haven't seen anything really that may have signs of it being derailed, and they seem to have organized it quite properly. And you know, what we normally do is that we normally benchmark it against the governing party, because that's the one that is used to having this kind of conferences. So it's something here totally different. So people are here on time, they follow things the way things are supposed to be done, I guess.
Well, I was just talking to the DA's Helen Ziller a short time ago in our previous interview, and she's really taking this as a victory and a picture really of what it is to be a part of the DA's event, and obviously using it for election purposes in a way. What did you think, Ronesh?
Well, you know, I've been at past DA conferences. I was there at the 2015 one where Musi Maimane was elected, and then obviously this one, we had one in 2020 during COVID times. Obviously, people couldn't gather in one, solitary space. But I think the word that comes up is efficient. From the time we got our accreditation yesterday, less than 30 seconds, and as Mzwa, the politics editor, referred to the ANC, the governing party, normally it's a very stressful, very strenuous time. I remember this one time the ANC came down for the NGC, the National General Council, in Durban in 2010, and we waited until midnight just to get those accreditation tags. So if you juxtapose the two, the ANC and the DA, then the DA is leaps and bounds ahead, in terms of organization, how things go. We finished surprisingly 3 hours early. What do we do with ourselves for these 3 hours?
Well, we have intelligent conversations. That's what we do, because this is certainly not a waste of airtime. It is an important moment for the country. We're going into an election year. A lot of the questions you get asked are, which way shall I vote? There are a lot of predictions made about the ANC's fortunes from their opposition, which is to be expected, but how much they're going to lose, and they're pinning their hopes on making some gains out of the ANC's losses. But it was a big day for two people in particular, and that was John Steenhuisen and Dr. Mpho Phalatse. And I want to share with our viewers now a little tidbit. If you missed John Steenhuisen's address, receiving a standing ovation, by the way, here's a little bit about what he said.
As the leader of the DA, I'm making 7 pledges to our delegates, and they are getting the ANC under 50% nationally, focusing our communication on issues that matter to voters, ending load shedding, reducing unemployment below 20%, defeating cadre deployment and building a capable state, halving violent crime, and devolving more power to provincial and local government. But Democrats, to bring any of our solutions to bear in time to save South Africa, it's time now for the DA to ascend to national government and provincial government around the country. And that's why all other pledges in my manifesto are anchored in this one priority. We must drag the ANC below 50%, and we, the DA, must form the core of a new majority in South Africa. We must show people that we're focusing our attention on their issues, the issues that matter to them. And key to achieving that is installing a blue government that operates on DA values.
So one of the things that stands out, Mzwa, is the plan to drag the ANC below the 50% mark. What's your sense? I mean, I think it's quite a powerful word. Does the DA have that power?
Well, as you have said at the beginning, so as a political party, that is their wish to get the ANC under 50. But as they say, easier said than done, I guess. Because if you still look at the current picture at the moment, yes, the ANC is struggling a bit in a number of areas, but I don't think we are there yet. And I know I could be proven wrong or even right, but if you look at what has happened, I mean, look at last week's by-election in the Western Cape. They lost that by-election to the very ANC. So it doesn't augur well. I know that there will be issues. They would say, no, there were these issues, blah, 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 blah. But it wouldn't augur well for a party that you want to unseat if they are still able to beat you. So they still have a lot of work to do. It's possible, it's doable, but it will take a lot more than just talking.
You agree, Ronesh?
I think there is some credence in what the DA is saying. The ANC, it is possible to bring them down that psychological mark of 50% if you look at the past research. And also you got to think in terms of other political parties entering the fray. The other point you also got to look at is the changing voters' roll. The voters' roll of 2024 is not necessarily the same voters' roll back in 1994. We're getting more younger people into the fray. Those younger people are going to be voting for those parties that actually resonate with the kind of values and their aspirations that speak directly to them. Is the ANC going to be that party? Is the DA going to be that party? Is it going to be any other party like the EFF or any other small player that possibly could enter? Plus 2024, the bill is still in Parliament, has not been signed by the President as yet. Possibility of independence coming into the fold as well. So the landscape could change. Like Mbeje is saying, from where I'm sitting from an analytical point of view, I think the ANC could be pulled below 50%, but I think it'll be a very tough one. Remember, we've got Cyril Ramaphosa there. It's not Jacob Zuma, like what Zille confronted back in 2014. The terrain is very different. Another 5 years.
Better or worse?
I don't know,
yeah.
but maybe not 2024. 2029, I think, give them another 5 years. The ANC, I think, that's when the ANC needs to be really, really worried, but not 2024. And I trust the judgment of this political editor sitting next to me.
Well, speaking of trust, someone who is wanting to build trust in those that are voting tomorrow for their new leader is Dr. Mpho Phalatse. So I want to just quickly share a clip with our viewers on what she said to the Congress a little earlier on.
But the truth is that we've been experiencing negative growth. Between the 2016 and 2021 local government elections, our party lost more than 1.4 million votes, and a total of 285 of our councillors lost their positions as elected public reps in communities. This, Democrats, is not because our brand is inferior, but it is because of a trust deficit that exists between us and the electorate. And this is what stands between us and our chances of becoming a national government. Everywhere I've been to campaign, people ask us, can we trust you? This Congress is an opportune moment for us to be bold and to once and for all address this challenge. I'm ready to lead the Democratic Alliance to embark on a process of introspection and repositioning from an opposition in Parliament to a governing party in 2024. Some critics ask me, is it not too soon? And I wish to state categorically here, without any fear of contradiction, it's not the length of time in a party that determines one's effectiveness. It's not the number of years that counts. It's about capability, experience, and qualifications.
Wow.
Impassioned words there as well. I saw the two of you nodding. Why are you nodding?
Ouch. I think that was a direct swipe at John Steenhuisen. We know the matric scandal. He does not have a tertiary qualification. He started his Bachelor of Politics, but to some family commitment or some kind of circumstance, he pulled out. The only qualification he's sitting with is a matric certificate. She's a medical doctor by qualification, by profession. she has not been within the structures of the DA. She was the Joburg mayor, then she was removed, then she was Joburg mayor again. She hasn't proven herself to the DA faithful within the party. Unlike John Steenhuisen, he hails from KZN. He was a very active member in KZN. Then he went to National Parliament.
And he said as much. I spent 10 years as councillor.
So he's proven himself as the chief whip to DA leader Mmusi Maimane. He built his brand from that position. He solidified, he cemented his position. So I think negative campaigning from her side, but it is a direct swipe at the incumbent leader, John Steenhuisen.
I see you also nodding.
If you look at what they've been agreeing on in terms of their constitutional amendments, when it came to the disciplinary issues, they are very strict. And I'm sure many of them may not take lightly to what she is saying, because it is a direct swipe at John Steenhuisen. In fact, when she mentioned, I know we didn't play it in the clip, in the broader speech, when she basically said she was a qualified medical doctor. When knowing what the doctors just said about John Steenhuisen. But of course, what really matters is do the delegates take seriously what she says? And then she herself is saying there is a trust deficit.
That's an important, I'm sorry to interject. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying the DA is saying, since Moses' removal or Moses' departure, let me put it that way, so there's been a positive growth. She comes and says there's a trust deficit. So you can see.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to interpret in the languaging there. And before we get to some of the meat of why this conference exists and why the Congress exists and what they're getting up to this weekend in terms of the resolutions, I just want to go back. That's quite a stark number, especially when you're coming off a base that you really want to grow, and you've suffered some electoral setbacks in the way that the DA has between 2016 and 2021. Her saying the number 1.4 million voters were lost, or votes were lost over this period. That's quite a punch to the gut, isn't it, for a party that needs every single vote?
Absolutely, and she's right, because she's not just talking about something out in the air. She's speaking about something that we can see. I mean, the fact that Mmusi Maimane is not leading this party because the party declined, and then what happened is that a party like Freedom Front Plus gained support. I think that's the reason why the DA is really serious about going. Every time you speak to them, they'll tell you about their core, about their traditional values, because they do not want to lose that core. But here's the question. If you so much don't want to lose the core, which may be fine, so how are you then expecting to embrace other people who may not necessarily relate with this? So there's a lot of introspection that the DA needs to do in order to be able to appeal to everyone. In fact, earlier I was saying, South African politics is very theatrical. It's very theatrical. So if you covered the DA, the doctor will tell you in 2007, so you wouldn't have seen anything of what you saw today. Now, they may not do it as the ANC or the EFF or even the IFP does it, but already those elements are there. That is South African politics for you.
There's some level of showmanship in there.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go away from the show then and into the substance. Let's talk about the resolutions. There are amendments that they are pursuing, 82 constitutional amendments. You've distilled them into a few critical highlights, Ronesh, and I'd love for you to share with our viewers, especially those who might be DA members, want to know, the substance of what's happening here.
I think, Iman, is very important before we actually go into the constitutional amendments that we actually discussed, debated and passed at the first day of today's Federal Congress is we have to reflect on what happened in 2018, between 2016 and 2019. Remember, soon after the 2019 general elections, the DA suffered significant loss. I think they lost around 470,000 votes. That's about 1.4% percentage points that the DA actually shared. They shared seats to the Freedom Front Plus and to a party spearheaded by Patricia de Lille, Good. And soon after, Mmusi Maimane, as the then leader, he commissioned a report. It was 31 pages long. The former DA leader was Tony Leon. He was part of it. Michelle Leroux, and there was another guy, Ryan Katsier, the former CEO. So when these guys looked at, they finally came out with their recommendations. the main recommendation was the CEO needs to resign, leadership needs to change, and it coincidentally happened that the Federal Council Chair, James Self, retired. He was due for retirement, so he stepped aside. So it was only natural for the leader of the party suffering a major electoral defeat in that election to naturally step down. So from my side, just looking at it from the outside, Mmusi Maimane was supposed to step down. So there's this big hoo-ha normally, mentioned about, in social media circles that Mmusi Maimane abandoned the party. He left us. He traumatized us. I don't think that is the case, because Mmusi Maimane did what was expected of a leader, because they suffered a huge setback. But coming back to those resolutions that, that were discussed earlier today, remember during that time as well, between 2016, Maimane was elected in May 2015, local elections, high time, all-time high in terms of electoral fortunes for the DA, then they slump in 2019, but in that period, there were a number of scandals plaguing the party, the DA. We had, Mmusi Maimane calling an impromptu press briefing at the Apartheid Museum of all places, just to, stamp his authority and say
to do some
DA,
damage control.
Yes, absolutely, and taking action, and he even made people within the party, senior leaders, sign a pledge, a non-racism pledge, to say that, this is not the vision of the DA. So there were other, issues that he tackled as leader. But that's the reason, if you look at the constitutional amendments, some of them actually pay very close attention to the establishment of commissions of inquiries when there's disciplinary issues. This Congress wants those commissions of inquiries to actually sit, deliberate. Those people who are speaking against the party, who are bringing the party into disrepute, especially on social media platforms, like we saw in the past between 2016 and 2019, leaders fighting over policies of the DA, BEE policies, the so-called diversity clause issue that was introduced by Maimane just 2 weeks before the 2018 Federal Congress. So all these kind of issues, I think what the DA wanted to do before the next election is bring it to Congress, let's thrash them out, let's present it to all the delegates, and let's take firm action, and let's put everything to rest so that we have a clean party with a clean message and a clean brand going into next year's elections.
I mean, the question is, can they leave a lot of that tumult behind, Mzwai, especially when some of those themes are dragged into a pre-election year?
Yeah, well, it's going to be very interesting to look, particularly from this Congress, because a lot really needs to happen for them to grow. I think one of the things really that the DA will have to deal with quite seriously and decisively is the issue, which interestingly Mpho makes, of the trust deficit. If you're saying you are for all, so have you catered for all to embrace you? Because the difficulty right now is that the DA says all the right things, but are they believable to the people that they are speaking to?
I mean, that's a question I put to Helen Ziller, right? You have all this evidence that qualifies you as being a party that is a party for everyone. She talked about the spread of their demographic representation. She talked about a number of different things in a way to push back against this idea that there is, these issues that are marginalizing members inside their party.
Certainly, and let's just make a very quick example that is currently happening in the coalition agreements. I mean, the changes that have been happening here in Gauteng. So this week in Joburg, it's the new mayor. If we've got stability here, we have to move to Tswane. If that one gets sorted out, Ekurhuleni. So it's just... and one of the things, those parties that are in coalition with the DA, they are basically saying the DA is arrogant. So it's their way or highway. So given that you are so intransigent, you don't want to perhaps accommodate others, especially now that you want to work with a lot more people. So how are you going to craft that? In fact, if you listen to their speeches on the podium, they keep telling all who that they are the biggest than the 6 parties combined. So which does tell them that they have ambitions to grow. But the question is, do you have the formula to grow, or your ambitions will then be blunted by the failure or the mechanism that you need to develop.
You know, you get the sense in listening to the speeches and speaking to some of the leaders that they feel the work's been done, in a sense, and they're ready now to campaign properly for the next year, or see themselves in the role not as opposition, but as biggest party in the country, a really ambitious goal. How do you see that perception, Ronesh, in the world that Mzwai is just describing, where you know, some people might not want to work with you because you believe that you are in a position of power and there's no room for anyone else?
I think, like Mzwai said, you know, there's a sense that the DA has this arrogance about itself, especially with dealing with other parties. But the DA's argument is always that we won more votes than you. We are not equal. Although we did not win the majority, 50% plus one, but we won more of the electoral support than, say, a party like the AIC or COPE or the ACDP. So how does that make us equal when we want to go into coalitions in key metros like Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, Johannesburg, Nelson Mandela Bay Metro in the Eastern Cape? So I think that's the argument. I got to, you know, somehow you got to reason with that rationality, you know, from this opposition party, the main opposition in the National Assembly, and then obviously their main opposition in a couple of the other provinces, I think 6 or 7 of the other provinces. I think that's the standpoint that they are approaching this from. But maybe what Mzwai is saying is absolutely, you know, has credence, has validity in it. The DA, whichever leadership is going to be elected here tomorrow, I think they've got to humble themselves. And I go back to that example of 2006 when Helen Zille was installed as mayor of Cape Town City Council. She held that coalition for the full 5-year term, despite all the ructions in 2008 with Badi Chaban's party, I think it was National People's Party, NPP or something. Despite all of that, there was an investigation and she came scot-free. She came out with flying colors. Despite that investigation, you know, she started that investigation, that inquiry. So she held that coalition together. So I think what she did differently, and I'm kind of glad that she's still within the party's ranks, because maybe they can draw from her wisdom. She even won the Mayor of the World Award in 2008. But you need to go back, reflect, retrospect. What did the DA do differently in 2006 compared to 2021 or 2016 or possibly in 2024? So I think lessons can be learned from there.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, lessons can be learned. They have to be learned really quickly. And in fact, on the issue of coalitions or even collaboration, I think what was really interesting in the interview that we had with her a short time ago was to look back at the DA's genesis story, their origin story, which was in a sense built in you know in working in a multi-party environment and trying to appease people. It didn't work out so well for them in 2001 when Martinez van Schalkwyk and the NNP broke away and then went across the floor and went to the ANC. But they're old hands at this now.
Oh yes, and talking about these coalition things, I think not only limited to the DA, I think South African parties, they need to think quite carefully about what to do with this, because just imagine if we, Doc and Iman, we have the president every 3 months, a new president, in the event no party. I mean, it's unsustainable. You can't do that. So we need to do like other established democracies do. Let's have these coalitions regulated. I mean, in most democracies, you have, for example, the biggest party giving the first bite to form the coalition government. And then, of course, if all else fails, the others can come in. And then I think that's what perhaps the DA uses when it engages with other parties. They basically say, you know what, we have more authority. Yes, it's not enough, but let us be the one who dictate terms.
Well, perhaps that's a nice note to conclude on, Mzwai. And I know, Helen Zille has talked about pursuing electoral reform, that even, the smaller parties have to reach a certain standard or threshold to even be included in the game around coalitions. And I'd like your thoughts on that, Ronesh, because one of the broader discussions we're having in South African society is the benefit of having coalitions, the diversification of, creating diversity in the way that our politics works. But, is this a boon or a burden?
I think, the issue is not so much how to govern those coalitions. I think more legislation is needed in tightening how motions of confidence can be brought against a sitting leader, whether it's at local level, provincial level, or even at national level. Because if you try to govern coalitions too much, somehow there's bound to be winners and losers. And how do you govern every minute detail of every possible tier of government? I think you're just creating more complications and more hurdles for yourself. If legislation can be put through the National Assembly and the NCOP, finally signed by the President, to say something like, these are how motions of confidence can be handled in this particular situation, then maybe, there could be something there. But from where I'm studying coalitions, I think if it's going to go on like this, no, we're not going to win.
Yeah, everyone's just seems to be really exhausted in the cities and towns where they've failed spectacularly, and service delivery is compromised. Final thought, tomorrow, closing day, what do we expect?
Well, tomorrow, this time, we'll be having a brand new leader of the DA, whether it's the incumbent or Dr. Mpopalatse.
The challenger.
So, yes. But obviously, when you look at the delegates and how everything has been going, so I'd put my money on John Steenhuisen.
My money.
on John Steenhuisen, given that he was really endorsed by quite.
He got the standing ovation. I was watching the room very closely.
So it was, even before this, so from the provinces, he got the bigger endorsement. So I'm not just saying this because I'm saying it, but I'm basing it on facts, having looked at how the DA does its work.
Okay, Mzwa, we won't put money on it, don't worry.
All right.
You're perfectly
Based on
safe.
research, it's going to be a landslide.
Really?
Based solely on research. Yeah.
Well, I can only say that the Chinese have an expression, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens tomorrow. But day 2, thank you very much for your excellent coverage and analysis. Our own SABC editorial and research team with Dr. Ronesh, Dhawraj, and political editor Zwandile, Mbeje. On that note, we hand it back to our studio in Johannesburg, and perhaps even a break, but do stay. With the full view, we'll have all the analysis on the social media trends. What's the goss?